Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Cartel. Welcome to another episode of Basic Nigerian History. In last episode, we discussed how the British took the Benin and the Yoruba lands. This episode, we will talk about the British focus on nations further up north, including the Sokoto Caliphates. Let's begin. With Chamberlain and the Colonial Office being directly involved in the goings-ons of Nigeria, the British figured it was time to start solidifying control over the areas they had already managed to capture and organizing these areas into neat sections. This was the beginning of proper colonial times for the land that would become Nigeria. In 1900, after wresting the authority away from the Royal Nigeria Company, aka the RNC, and revoking their charter, the British then merged the Niger Coast Protectorate with the previous RNC Southern Territories to form the Southern Nigerian Protectorate. And that was basically the area below Lokoja. Wafmo became High Commissioner of Southern Nigeria and proceeded to carry out his own method of ruling in the south, unknowingly laying deep seeds of British resentment in the hearts of the people, as they seriously disrespected and disregarded traditional structures and rules. The British also took away the RNC's northern territories like Ilorin, Bida, Yola, Nupe, and established the Northern Protectorate. Instead of naming Godi, he was the leader of the RNC as the first High Commissioner of the Northern Protectorate, Frederick Lugard, the ruthless warmonger, was named the first High Commissioner. I will explain why I called him a ruthless warmonger later. The dissolution of the RNC pleased a lot of people, as it meant that finally, RNC's monopolistic activities could come to an end. Southern and Northern Nigerian Protectorates were now in the hands of the Crown, governed by the Colonial Office at Whitehall, which was led by the imperialist Chamberlain. His name is Chamberlain and is an imperialist. Under the Colonial Office was the governor, who ruled things on the ground, but the Colonial Office could veto his decision if they so choose. Now that they had the majority of the south under their control, the only small places remaining were like pockets of resistance in the southeast. It was time to turn their attention to the north and get Sokoto under them. Now, Sokoto was a big problem for the British for two reasons. The first reason was that even though the British had taken some of their territories, which were previously mentioned, such as Ilorin, Bida, Yola, Nupe, the Caliph still had influence in those places. So the people there could disobey or even revolt against Frederick Lugard, who was leading the British agenda. The second reason was the fact that the French was getting closer and closer to Sokoto, coming in from the northwest, and they could make a play for the Niger through Sokoto if they beat the Caliph before the British beat up the Caliph. So it was a race to see who could beat up the Caliph first. The British had previously tried through the Royal Nigeria Company, aka the RNC, to establish a military post in Sokoto in 1899 to block the French, but they were rebuffed by the Caliph. So Mr. Frederick Lugard, the ruthless warmonger, decided the British would have to conquer Sokoto Caliphate by force. So in 1900, otherwise known as 1900, otherwise known as 1900, the campaign against the Sokoto Caliphate begins under the direction of the governor of the Northern Protectorate, Governor Frederick Lugard. His objective was to conquer the north and obtain British recognitions among the Emirs and the Fulani. He attacked before telling the Colonial Office in London. He figured asking for forgiveness is better than asking for permission. He didn't give them a choice in the matter. So when the Colonial Office found out, they had no choice but to pretend they already knew about the attack and they approved it. It should be noted that even though the Caliphate was so big, it didn't have a standing army. If you recall in the previous episodes, I mentioned that the Caliphate was more of a collection of independent emirates than a single entity. So if the Caliph wanted to get an army together, he would have to ask each emirate independently to donate soldiers. Due to this scattered nature of the Caliphate, he couldn't really deploy large armies to stop the British from coming in as quickly as he wanted to. The emirates were left to fend for themselves. Now, there was no justification for the British to interfere in the north, no excuses, no treaties or invitations like they had been in the south. They simply wanted to conquer, and conquer they did. Lugard started the campaign by attacking and occupying Abuja, opening up the route and leaving behind a small contingent. He then moved on to deposing the emirs of Bida, Kontagora and Yola, and replacing them with emirs that submitted to his own authority. The emir of Kontagora actually ran away and hid for a bit, but he was later restored to his position after he agreed to Lugard's terms. The emir of Yola also ran, seeking refuge in the German protected areas, but he was hunted down and killed. They also killed the emirs of Nasarawa, Kaba, and Muri. After doing all of that, Lugard moved on to Bauchi and Gombe. they reduced Bauchi to ruins with their powerful weapons. It seemed that this emirate up north hadn't heard of the Maxim machine gun or what it did to the Ijebu people. This was just the beginning of the fall of the Sokoto Caliphate. They hadn't seen nothing yet. Much worse was still to come. Meanwhile, as all of this was happening up north, things were also happening down south. Well, to be fair, what was happening in the southwest was quite different to what was happening in the southeast. In the southwest, the Yoruba and Aja were being assimilated into colonial rule. For example, by 1901, the colonial government in Lagos had employed over 1,100 civil servants and clerks, all employed to the lower level of bureaucracy. But those 1,100 were all Yoruba people, like Africans, natives. The same year, the new railway from Aro to Abeokuta was opened, and the railway from Lagos to Ibadan was also opened. Keep in mind, all of these railways was built using forced labor. Also, this was when the first African lawyer made it to the Legislative Council as an official member. In the southeast, however, there were still some small pockets of resistance fighting the British. For example, in 1900, the Ekumeku had risen up again. This time, they rose up to defend Asaba and its hinterlands against the rules and the disregard of the new protectorate government led by Ralph Moore. Between 1901 to 1902, the British launched the Anglo-Aro War in the name of liberating the Igbo people from the Aro Confederacy. Ralph Moore believed that the Aro was the main obstacle to British rule in the East, but he was wrong, of course. The Aro held influence, but they weren't a powerhouse. They weren't a large city-state. Getting rid of them didn't mean all the Igbo people and the people in the southeast would just immediately fall in line. His predecessor, Claude MacDonald, had argued for a more conciliatory approach to the East. But no! Oh, Rafi boy wasn't feeling that. He was like, I found the key, I know the best. Kill them all, Joe. Kill all the Aro people. The Aro were defeated easily, as they have very little in the way of military power. Although, to be fair to them, they continued constant guerrilla warfare with the British until 1902. Anyways, after the defeat of the Aro, the British still couldn't control the diverse tribes that the Aro previously had influence over. Because like I said, the Igbos didn't have a central leader or a central political organization. Each community did whatever the heck they wanted. What Ralph Moore had actually done was that he had destroyed the only social and political structure that existed in the area. So if anything, it actually made the problem worse. Now the Igbos were even more fragmented than before and they couldn't easily be controlled. The year of 1901 was the year that Ralph Moore established the native courts for the colonial administrations and created the concept of warrant chiefs, meaning he gave any native that pleased him a warrant to sit at these courts. Any issue that involved an European was dealt with at a normal court, which was presided over by actual lawyers and stuff. But issues that only involved Africans were dealt with at the native court, which was run by non-lawyers, and lawyers weren't even allowed to offer representation at these native courts, and the normal rules didn't apply. The person that made the decisions at these native courts were the warrant chiefs, the people that had pleased Ralph Moore, the people that had kissed his ass, and it's like, yes, I like you. The British selected chiefs that kissed their buttocks and were basically yes men for the native courts. These chiefs were not respected at all by their people. This is because whenever the British would arrive in a community and ask for their leaders, the people would point the British towards unimportant people in order to protect their actual real leaders. Also, sometimes the British would put these so-called chiefs in charge of areas they weren't even a part of. So imagine picking a chief from a particular section and saying you're not in charge of this section, and it's like, I don't even know these people. Well, it is what it is. This is what the British were doing in the southeast. The structure of power in the southeast went: the resident officer was at the top, then came the district officer, then came the warrant chiefs, and then the county clerks, and then finally the people. The people of the southeast greatly opposed the English justice. The warrant chiefs relied on the British for their authority, and the warrant chiefs were usually resented by their population, and their authority often openly resisted. Here is a fun fact. The district commissioner of the Ikot Ekpene was the first person to give his warrant chief a Moroccan red fez hat and a staff of office. Soon, this practice caught on, and a red fez hat became the symbol for a chief throughout the whole East. And I think I should just end it there for this episode. Just a recap of what we learned. In this episode, we learned about the attack that Frederick Lugard started to do on the northern states and the Caliphates. We also talked briefly about what was going on down south in the southwest, how the Yorubas were being assimilated into colonial rule, and how the Igbos were still trying to resist and fight every now and then. That's it for this episode. As usual, you can support us by joining our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/RonuCreative, and of course, show us love, show us the support, subscribe, tell the world, share these videos. We love you. Peace.